Well, welcome everybody. Welcome to the first session of the second class, 402, the Business of Craft Brewing, more on the management side. So you'll see that this time we tend to have a different person every week depending on the topic at hand. So we have people that really specialize in certain aspects like scheduling or inventorying, forecasting. So we'll really be matching up the topic with a speaker. But we'll probably have Charlie back a few times because he enjoyed it so much last time. But tonight we have Mike Wright, and he's with the Commons. And as we saw, Justin, one of the students, has just been to Portland, and he said the Commons was hands down his favorite spot. And they're doing great stuff. And they are. And Mike just won 2 medals at the Great American Beer Festival. One for the farmhouse ale and the other for the Myrtle.
That's seasonal.
So both really great products, and Mike's a great innovator. And he's here during our first session because we've been focusing on strategy this week. But we've also are starting to move a bit into the scheduling aspect. So he's going to speak to that, and he's put together some slides to show. I thought the slides actually were quite beautiful. So I think you're going to really enjoy them too. And just so you know, I've made the slides into a PDF file because they're actually pretty big because they have a lot of photos. So I will actually put those online after this tonight so you can see the slides in a bigger format. And again, you can change your screens if you want to have the slides as the center part of your screen. You can go down to the lower right-hand corner and change your view so that you can see the slides bigger. Or for us, we like to see the chat. It's easier for us to have the box filled with the chat in the center so we can read your questions. So if anybody has any questions to start with about anything to do with administration in the class, let me know. You can type in a question now. Otherwise, we're going to have Mike start. So first I'll see if there's any questions from you guys about what's going on in class. We've all found the Ale Apothecary post that's due Sunday night to post about the strategy that Ale Apothecary is using, and we have a nice video with Paul from that particular brewery in Bend. Really interesting place. No administration questions? Everybody's okay? And you know, you can always send me a direct message via Canvas if you have any questions about anything. I try and help you where I can. So we'll let Mike get started with his presentation.
Right.
Thanks for coming, Mike.
Yeah, thank you, Melly. So as Melly said, my name is Mike Wright. I'm the owner, founder of the Commons Brewery. And I'll hit on 3 things tonight. I'll just very quickly tell you about our story, which is a fairly short story at this point. I'll touch on a little bit of strategy from our world, and then scheduling as well. And as I understand it, you guys have already been talking about strategy and you've been talking about scheduling, and Melly talked through the scheduling document that you're using, an Excel spreadsheet, which sounds very similar to what we're using. So that should be relevant. All right, well, I'll just quickly jump into to who I am and who the Commons Brewery is. The Commons Brewery started as a brewery in my garage. Thank you, I'm being reminded about slides here.
Okay.
Go for it, let's get the first one. All right, so the Commons Brewery started in my garage. This was the summer of 2010. I basically had let a home brewing hobby get out of control, and I decided to see if I couldn't get licensed in my garage. Admittedly, I was a little bit skeptical. I didn't really think they were going to let me do that. Fast forward about 8 months later, and I actually did succeed in that. I was licensed to produce beer in my garage and sell that wholesale around town. And it's sort of apropos that we're talking about strategy because I didn't have one at the time. What I've decided is that our strategy is really very organic. So we definitely have some high-level goals that we're seeking and chasing after, and that really helps shape our strategy. But back to the garage. So started in the garage. After maybe 6 to 8 months in the garage, with a couple of beers and a handful of accounts around town, I decided that I was really enjoying this and that I wanted to continue to pursue it. And so I put all of these spreadsheets aside because, frankly, they were telling me not to do this. And I joke, but it's somewhat true that I put all logic and common sense aside and decided to move forward. Found a new space, started to procure equipment, and built out a brewery in short order. So by the summer of 2011, was in a new building with the 7-barrel brew house. We started brewing in September of that year and opened the doors in December of 2011, and just started charging forward. So here we are, I guess, almost 2 years later, and I think we're getting close to being a legitimate brewery, which feels kind of good. And I should add, too, that I had a nearly 15-year career in corporate IT as a business analyst and a project manager. So scheduling is something certainly I was familiar with, maybe just on a level, but I was able to leave that about a year ago and go full-time at the brewery, which it deserved, and it's been a pleasure to give full-time to that. So strategy. I think that you guys have been talking about strategy from a sort of larger scale, New Belgium, and that's fantastic. I would guess that they have a very mature strategy document and strategy program to keep that alive. Right now, ours, as I said, is very organic. When I got out of the garage and moved into the new space, I hired a couple of employees, and we really just started to develop the strategy as we were going forward, frankly. Now, the core strategy that I did carry over from the garage and moved into the new brewery, which we then renamed the Commons Brewery, was to focus on these Belgian, French, German-inspired beers, and for the most part, steer away from the American ales that were being produced very successfully here in the Portland area, and very specifically to not brew an IPA. And I know that that's astonishing to some people, and I've had some people tell me straight to my face that it's ridiculous. But my argument was that there were, at that time, 48 breweries in town. I think we're up to like maybe 52 or 54 now, who are making fantastic American ales, making fantastic IPAs, and here's this new kid on the block coming in with relatively little to no experience, and I didn't want to take them on head-to-head, frankly. I thought I'm going to take a slightly different pathway and focus on some other beers. And at the time, there was one other brewery in town that was just getting some traction, doing a little bit of that, but otherwise there was really nothing going on with this sort of farmhouse, Belgian-inspired concept. Aside maybe from a couple of beers being produced every once in a while by the existing breweries in town. So that was the core strategy, was we're going to focus on this. And then we really started to just kind of think about what our beliefs were, who we were, what our personalities were, the kind of beers we wanted to make, and started to build layer by layer a strategy based on that. And for example, what I mean is I'm a very simple, sort of straightforward, humble person, and we wanted to reflect that personality both in the brand and the beers. And so that started, again, to get layered out. And then as you continue to move forward into the packaging and the branding and the visual side of things, we just kept building on that. Now, as we move forward, we still, and it sounds ridiculous to admit this, but we still do not have a formal strategy document. We're a very small company. we're able to do this, again, sort of organically and verbally throughout the process. So what I don't want to suggest is that we don't have a strategy and that we don't spend time on it. We actually spend a lot of time on it. I think we could be accused of overthinking a lot of things, but I'm actually sort of okay with that. We spend a lot of time thinking about various things in its strategy from a high level all the way down to the littlest things, and then make educated decisions to go forward. So I think, again, the kind of the suggestion that I want to make, and I'm certain that companies like New Belgium are doing this, or just doing it in a much more formal way, is to really think about who you are, think about the message you want to convey, think about your products and your brand, and what do you want people to take away. And I know it sounds like I'm scooting over into marketing, and to some extent that's true, but your strategy should really be to move toward the summary of who you are, what message you want to convey, what the visual brand is, and really just to make sure that when people experience all of those things, that they're actually, to some extent, experiencing your strategy. And it's not necessarily easy to do. And I think the other thing that I want to suggest is that, and I'm certain you guys have already talked about this, but this is not something that you do once and then just move forward and never revisit. I mentioned that I had a nearly 15-year career in corporate IT, and in the last maybe 6 to 8 years, I worked with this methodology called Agile Scrum, where it's very iterative, incremental, and you're focused on a very small thing, and you continue to revisit and refine and move forward. And I've really taken a lot of that sort of methodology and strategy coming into the company, into the Commons Brewery. And so we don't plan that far ahead, frankly, because things are so dynamic in this industry. The beer is a living product. It's super dynamic. And things change on a regular basis, so we're constantly revisiting. So I think just as we were getting cut off, I was talking about making sure you continue to revisit, be agile. This business changes frequently. Your customers are going to change. Beer is dynamic. Just continue to revisit it on a regular basis, if not, to some extent, just part of your everyday process. That's not to say that you don't have higher level targets, goals, strategy that's guiding you along the way, but just make sure that you're continually revisiting that. All right, so let me sort of do but we don't get to here. I'm just going to throw out a few sort of suggestions that from my world that I think feed into strategy. And this is where the slides may or may not come in. We're not sure we can get them going. But one of the biggest suggestions that I have, and I do believe feeds into strategy because it really feeds into your entire company and potential success, is to put your aside and hire people that are smarter than you at whatever it is that you need them for. The examples of that specific to the Commons Brewery are, as soon as I moved into the garage, I hired a formally trained brewer, and shortly after that hired another fellow who helps us out with both sales, marketing, and distribution. We do self-distribute, at least for a little bit longer. So, and that has been a tremendous boon for me and for the company as a whole, hiring these people that they're better at those particular tasks than I am. The brewer that I hired, Sean, he's a much better brewer than I am. He's more creative. We're definitely carrying through that high-level goal of French, German-inspired farmhouse ales, and we just made sure, I made sure that I was hiring somebody that had similar taste and that could express really what I was after, and I've been very, very lucky in that respect. The other one, and by the way, none of this is revolutionary. I'm just restating things that people have been doing in business, small business, big business for years on end. But keep it simple. This goes back to the Agile Scrum stuff that I did in software development as well. One of the things that I'm doing is making sure that we're not trying to solve problems that aren't yet a problem. And you can easily get sucked into that when you're thinking about growth and the lead times that exist for equipment and where are we going to be in a year and that kind of stuff. Next thing you know, you're trying to solve problems that aren't a problem yet. Solve the problems that are pain points now, and either push off or even completely ignore the ones that aren't a problem right now, because maybe they won't ever be a problem, or maybe they'll be a problem in a different form at some point. So keep it simple and deal with the stuff that's in front of you right now, give that focus, and just keep the other ones on your radar as you move forward. And then I talked also about, sort of building your strategy from the center out, where you're trying to convey a particular message and feeling and all of that, and just carry that through your products. Through your message all the way down to the label, etc. We did have a couple of slides that show the labels, and you'll get to see those, if not now, later. One of the things that I wanted to make a comment about our labels is they're very simple. There's a lot of white space. There's a single color on there, and that's for a number of reasons. And I would ask you to do this too, and this goes for beer, wine, anything. Go to your grocery store, your beer store, whatever it is, and go to the lineup, take a few steps back, and look at the ones that are jumping out at you. Because what happens is you take a few steps back and you're looking at that cooler full of wine, beer, liquor, whatever it is, and it's almost just a sea of color, of camouflage, and a lot of the beers are just blending into the one next to it. And so I took note of what is actually jumping out and why is it jumping out, and we just incorporated that kind of stuff into our labels. A lot of white space, a little bit of color, and kept it very, very simple and straightforward. And it's basically a template that we can reuse over and over again. We changed the name of the beer, changed the color, a couple of words on it here and there, and we've got it in 40 minutes instead of spending weeks with a designer for each and every label. So again, getting back to keeping it simple and carrying that theme through all the way. But also standing out. I mean, so our beers do stand out on the shelf, and that's important because I'm not exactly sure where all of you are living, but here in Portland, with this super healthy craft scene, there is dozens and dozens and dozens of beers that people can choose from. And they might be going on the recommendation of their steward, but they also might just be looking at the shelf. And so you want that beer to stand out a little bit. So being forward-thinking, as you know, this is a living product that we're making, even if it's it's wine or liquor. You go through a process where your hands are sort of off of it for a while, and you need to let the product do its thing. So you need to be forward-thinking, and what does this product going to do. You certainly try to steer it in the right direction, but also what seasonal things are coming up, what are people looking for, and trying to you want your customers to be happy. You produce the beers that you want, but you also want your customers to be happy with the product that you're developing. And sometimes that requires you to take a turn here and there. Now I know this is true for the brewing industry. I can't speak to it as much for liquor and wine, but the beer industry is remarkably collegial. So I would suggest that you check with your fellow brewers, other businesses in town, get to know them, and don't be afraid to ask them questions. They're very, very open, typically, and that's not true in every single case, but it's true in most cases. And it was a huge boon for me to be able to get input from people all over town. And collaborate whenever you can, and I don't mean just with other brewers. We've worked with a baker in town who actually took the urban farmhouse grist, the grain mill, and our yeast and made a bread from that, which was really amazing, and we turned that into a couple of events. So all of these things, again, they do tie back to your strategy, right? It's again, about what the message you're trying to convey, the story you're trying to tell, and we're trying to tell a story of these simple, refreshing, unpretentious, warm, inviting beers, and things like partnering with a baker and making bread, and partnering with a cheesemaker and putting all those things together and talking about that in a comfortable setting really just reinforces that whole notion.
Who's the baker?
In this case, it was Little T.
Oh, Little T.
Mm-hmm.
Really good.
Yeah. And then I think maybe sort of just closing on the strategy, and then I'll touch very quickly on scheduling, and then I'll let you guys ask questions you have. Don't be afraid to just throw the strategy document aside sometimes, or the strategy aside, and go with your gut and have a little fun. I think that's almost part of our strategy to some extent is, we really think about these things, be very thoughtful, mindful of everything that's around us, but sometimes you just have to go with your gut, and usually it works out because you've been very thoughtful about it. And then certainly enjoy the ride. I mean, I think most of us are getting into this business because it's a lot of fun, and it certainly is a lifestyle to some extent.
I was just going to ask you just about distribution, because I've been reading through everybody's business plans, and people talk a lot about self-distribution. So do you want to tell us a little bit about your distribution journey?
Yeah. So we have self-distributed from day one, and I should add that we're very lucky in Oregon that we're allowed to do that. I know because not in all states you're not allowed to do that. So it's a privilege that we're allowed to self-distribute. That offered us two things. One certainly was that we kept that middleman part of the money. The other thing is that nobody can sell the beer or tell the story like we can. We controlled the beer from grain all the way through to handing it off to our customers. And we're able to build rapport, build relationships with the buyers, the beer stewards, and that has been, it's been tremendous, I think, for us. To the extent we go to new seasons and can see that our beer buyer or the steward is recommending our beer because we've built those relationships.
For those of you who are out of state, New Seasons is a 13-unit sort of natural foods-ish store that's all around the city of Portland and has a fantastic beer and wine collection.
Yeah, thank you. It almost doesn't matter what the store is, but it could be a beer-centric bar, restaurant, or a grocery store. again, there was twofold there. There was allowing us to control our beer all the way, build those relationships, tell the story from beginning to end. And we are getting close probably to handing off distribution to a distributor. Our goal and our plan has been all along to do this as long as possible can until the point where it's really just too much work for us. And we're getting very close to that and very thoughtful in evaluating distributors and other options. And at this point, I think we're pretty close to handing off distribution to another distributor. I will say, though, that we are thinking of them more as a logistics company. We're not handing off and saying, good luck, go get them. We are really going to be leading the sales and marketing efforts in partnership with them, or even leading them, I should say, in most cases, because we just want to make sure that the story is being told right and the beer is being handled correctly. So it's a really excellent option. It definitely is volume, sort of contingent. We are a fairly small, low-volume brewery, so this was a reasonable thing for us to be able to do. Bought a delivery truck. We have a 1.5 FTE essentially on sales and delivery, and we were able to do that. Build our brand up, and now we're ready to cover the logistics side and allow us to help put efforts into other areas like brand management and sales, and let the logistics taken over by a professional, frankly. Okay, so I'm just going to touch on scheduling really quick, and then I'll let you guys jump in with any questions you have. It sounds like you've been working through some of the scheduling concepts. I will say that it's tough. Scheduling in general is very difficult. I talked earlier about revisiting strategy. At this point, we are constantly revisiting schedule, like I would say daily. We schedule out basically a quarter in advance now, and at that point what we're doing is we're essentially just blocking out tank time for the beers that we want in that particular quarter. And then we're going back, and the week prior to actually executing a set of tasks, for example, next week we would start scheduling this past Monday in detail because things have changed, of course, because again it's a living product. And then reflect the domino effect through the rest of the quarter again. And then at the beginning of the week, the schedule basically gets broken down into a set of tasks for that week, and that's just on a whiteboard. We write out the entire set of tasks for the week. And by that I mean transfer from FB4 to BB3, and on Wednesday you're bottling out of BB3 and cleaning that tank, and we get down to certainly a very task-oriented level at that point. Scheduling can be made easier if you have a single yeast. We definitely make our lives very difficult, and that we've got 4, sometimes 5 yeasts in play. That is part of our strategy. We are a yeast-forward brewery. And I'll just contrast that very quickly with the vast majority of the breweries that exist in the Portland metro area. They're really, again, sort of American-style, English-style breweries, and they use very clean yeasts, American ale yeasts, or maybe an English ale yeast or something like that, but really let the malt and the hops come through. We sort of are on the other end of the spectrum and are very reserved in the malt and the hop character, and let the yeast do a lot of the talking, I should say. So because we're a yeast-forward brewery, to get a lot of different flavors, we use a lot of different yeasts. And that makes scheduling very difficult. By that I mean we schedule to the yeast, because if you're trying to keep 4 or 5 yeasts alive and healthy, we might want we might want Beer Royale, which I've got sitting in front of me here, next week, but we can't do that because we need to keep another yeast alive, so we'll brew Flemish Kiss, which uses a different yeast. I mean, we definitely try to, bend it to our will whenever we can, and we'll make those difficult decisions like let a yeast die off if we have to because we need a particular beer. It's just absolutely necessary to have it at a certain time. That's fine. We'll make that conscious decision. But we schedule to the yeast, and then we schedule to quality. That's the other thing right now. So it's very easy to get sort of locked down into a grid on your schedule and just follow along, and it says, okay, it's going to take me 6 days for primary, and then I'm moving it over to the bright tank. But my advice, of course, is don't do that if the beer is not ready, and change your schedule. You need to schedule to quality and decide when it's ready, which is why scheduling is difficult. Really, because you're scheduling to this living product and scheduling to quality, and that makes it a difficult process. But I think, so what we're using, I think, is very similar to what you guys are using. We essentially have a spreadsheet, and we've got it broken up by quarter, so there's multiple tabs in the spreadsheet for each quarter, and we have a vote, if you will, for each tank, so FV1 through the FV5 to the FV6 for us, fermentation vessel.
I think that's on our same page.
All right, great. And then just the time scale on the top. And the beer moves through those tanks. And the way we do it, I think Melanie said that you guys were using some sort of color scheme. In our case, we use a color scheme that represents the yeast. So blue for the farmhouse yeast, and you can see that carrying along. Again, that's just our challenge because we need to schedule to yeast. So you can see that yeast moving along through its life cycle. But it's actually a pretty effective tool, and we've talked with a number of other brewers around town, and it was actually it was quite relieving to hear that we weren't the only one facing scheduling challenges. As I understand it, it's a pretty common challenge that's shared by just about everybody in this industry. I don't have any quick recipe there. I think it's just something that you have to stay on top of, and you're constantly revisiting because the beer is a living product. You have to adjust.
It did ruin a river trip for me on the Middle Fork of the Salmon once. I thought the schedule could predict my vacation, but the beer did. So I had to fly into the river trip. So
there you go. Yeah.
It wasn't ideal.
Maybe I'll just leave it there. And I know I sort of blazed through a bunch of stuff, but I'd love to hear from you and see what questions you have, and I'd be happy to answer about anything.
Yeah, so we have 20 minutes for questions, so I know you guys have a lot of questions there. Who can type the fastest? Anybody has any questions?
Yeah, I sure can. So right now we're at about.
I'll repeat the question.
Oh, sorry.
I think everybody can see it in case you can't. Does the Commons sell a lot of draft beer, or is it mostly?
Okay, so draft and bottled right now, and we've been very consistent actually over the past year and a half. We're at about 65-70% draft, and the remainder is in packaged in bottles. We really like our beer in the bottle. It's a lot of effort. We work on a, actually not for much longer, but on a gravity, 6-head gravity filler. It's a ton of work. It's what we were doing all day today. So we're somewhat limited by that, but we're moving to some semi-automated machine here in a bit.
They have a tasting room, so a certain percentage is going to the tasting room.
Yes, I'm sorry. Yeah, so we have a tasting room that's open 4 days a week. And it's a few hours each day. It's really only about 4 or 5 hours. It's in the evening. And that's because our tasting room is our brewery. Essentially what we do is we shut down production. We open up the brewery. And it's great because people are literally in the brewery. They're right where the beer is being made. It's got a really nice feel. It does have an impact on production, which is why we don't open up more. Okay, I've got a question about, give us a brief overview of your brewery, size of the system, number and size of fermenters, etc. So we're a very small brewery. I've got a 7-barrel brew house, super simple. It's a fusion mash tun, a gas-fired kettle, and a very undersized hot liquor tank, which we backfill regularly during brew days with an on-demand hot water heater. Started out with 2 7-barrel fermenters and 2 7-barrel bright tanks. Not long after, I don't know, maybe it was 8 months into production, we added 2 15-barrel fermenters. And then a few months later added a 15-barrel bright tank. And we have just recently taken possession of a 30-barrel fermenter, and we have 1 more 30 on the way at the end of the month. At the end of this month. Now, I do want to add that when we bought those 2 15-barrel fermenters, which was May of 2012, at that point, this ties back to strategy, we made a conscious decision to buy tanks, fermenters, bright tanks, etc., in 15-barrel increments because we knew that our 7-barrel brew house was too small and that at some point we would be moving to so that was the size of the system, number and size of the fermenters. So 2 7-barrel fermenters, 2 15-barrel fermenters, and soon to be 2 30-barrel fermenters, and then a sprinkling of bright tanks in there. Right. When scaling up from a nano, how did you decide on the barrel size of the brew house, and what plans did you make at the beginning for future expansion, if any? Yeah, Rich, so when I went from my garage, which was essentially a 40-gallon system, 1.5-barrel system, into the sort of more legitimate commercial production brewery, I bought a 7-barrel brew house. There was 2 things really that were at play there. One was finances. I had pretty limited funds starting up the brewery. And 2, frankly, was confidence. I was not quite ready to go big, frankly, 10, 15, 20, 30, whatever it would be, barrel system. I mean, I was coming out of my garage, had absolutely no professional experience working in a brewery. So this was a conscious decision to just take small steps forward. And what plans did I make at the beginning for expansion? Not enough. Ended up in a 1,500 square foot building, which we grew out of almost immediately. It took us a year to get the space next door, which gave us 1,000 square feet, which is where we're at now, and we grew out of that about a month after moving into it. So we're in the process now of trying to figure out where we're going to be for the next few years, and it's all but certain that we'll be moving to a new facility. And so now I'm putting a lot of thought into expansion and future growth, and how do we stay in a spot for 5 to 10 years? That's the ideal situation, because you don't want to build out a brewery or move a brewery on a regular basis. It's just not feasible. Okay, I'm going back up to John's question. Your competition beers, do you brew them with the competition in mind, or do you just select your best available examples? If you do alter your methods, what is different? We don't brew with competition in mind. We brew the beers that we want to brew and sell. And when it comes to competition time, frankly, it's trying to figure out where beer might fit, and by that I mean what category. The vast majority of our beers do not fit well. We don't brew to style, I guess is what I should say. So we spend a lot of time tasting beers, reviewing the guidelines, and seeing if a beer fits that particular category. And a lot of times we're gambling, and it maybe doesn't work. Urban Farmhouse, which is the Belgian French style Saison category, fits fairly well, and it seems like that one's fairly straightforward. But we don't brew the competition, and we don't alter our methods for the competition beers. We really brew the beers we want, and then we come back around later and see if we can fit a beer into a particular category.
Let's see. The process you went through in hiring your head brewer?
Yeah. So I actually was connected with a fellow who was in brewing school through an acquaintance, a friend in town. He was a professional brewer here in town, and he had a friend who had decided to make a career change and was working his way through the Siebel Institute, Duman's Master Brewers program. And we actually started communicating via email because he was in Germany at the time. And it was really, at that point, frankly, it was not very formal just because I was really flying by the seat of my pants as I was moving into the new space and figuring out what I was doing. But basically, we communicated for a while via email. It seemed like we had some similar tastes in beer. I didn't really know anything about his skill set other than he was working his way through formal training. When he got back into town, actually the first thing I did was I invited him down to the brewery, and we spent a couple of days doing some manual labor. And by that I mean there were some things we were building in the brewery. I just wanted to get to know him to see if this is somebody that I could work with. That was one of the most important things for me. Does this fellow have a personality that is going to work for me, and does he have the right mindset? So I was really kind of measuring him up in that respect more than I was with his brewing capability. He had just come out of formal training in brewing school, so I knew he had some skills. Frankly, I didn't know what they were, and to some extent I did get lucky there. What would I do, for the next brewer that we hire? We would certainly get a lot more in depth about their skill set and their sort of beer beliefs and style sort of alignment, the kind of stuff we're doing. And I think that's important for us because hire a brewer who has a tremendous set of skills, but their whole world is IPA or double IPA. And it's not that there's anything wrong with those beers. I like them, I drink them, but that's not what we do. And they're probably not going to be happy in our setting if that's what their world is about. So there's got to be alignment with what we do. They've got to have the skills that they can literally just jump in and start working almost immediately. So that's the head brewer, but that's sort of an answer to hiring any brewer at this point. And that actually goes for any position, I think, our company moves forward.
What was the largest obstacle you had to overcome to get your facility open?
So it turns out building a brewery is basically building a small manufacturing facility, and I knew absolutely nothing about that. So there were 1,000 small obstacles that really turned into one big, large obstacle. I didn't know really anything at that point. It was really an amazing journey trying to figure it all out, and I enjoyed it. But a lot of it had to do with the mechanics of setting up a system and all the utilities that go along with that. Because I bought tanks, essentially. I bought a kettle. I bought a mash tun. I bought a control panel, and putting all of that together was a ton of work because I had never done it before and I had no idea what I was doing. So there's certainly a lot of value about our Hebrew house, I will say that.
There's this in here. Robinson.
Okay. So Robinson, it says, is there anything special you do with the beer? A combination of accessible and highbrow. Maybe it's just you, the team with great taste, but I'd be curious if there's a conscious decision to do that. Yes, actually, and it's interesting that you're asking that. I don't know if it's something that you've noticed or if you're just asking, but specifically with Urban Farmhouse, we really feel like that beer is able to sort of span the spectrum from backyard barbecue to white tablecloth, and we've definitely made a conscious decision to sort of explore and get that beer on that entire broad spectrum. So, you know, we'll sell it at the grocery store, and we'll tell the story about how it's fantastic with you know, with your friends and family in the back porch or barbecue or whatever. And then we also made inroads at white tablecloth restaurants in town where they will pair it with meals or make a cocktail with it or something like that. So we really have made a conscious decision to go sort of both directions with that beer, and we feel like it works.
And Cameron's asking, how many recipes do you brew each year?
A lot. Too many, actually. We're going to start tightening that up just a little bit. So we have 2 year-round beers in the bottle. We have 1 year-round beer on draft, which is Urban Farmhouse. And then we have a seasonal. We're calling it seasonal. It's probably not the right term, but essentially what we're doing is we're releasing a new beer in the bottle about every 2 months. And we typically back that up with draft as well. And then we have untold numbers of different draft beers that we're brewing all the time. It's a lot of fun for us. It's a lot of fun, I think, for our customers. But this ties into scheduling. It's sort of a scheduling nightmare, honestly. So it's something we're going to be tightening up a little bit, especially as we go forward and probably partner with a distributor. We'll definitely tighten that up.
Get some barrel-aged beers in there. Well, you'll see in a few lectures I'm showing another of his beers that's in a barrel. Alicia?
Amelie.
Amelie.
Yep.
Amelie.
Right. So Amelie's right. We have it's a fairly small barraging program right now. We've got maybe 60 barrels. It's something we definitely want to grow, but we're limited by our space at this point. What that does, though, is it allows us to come out with either single barrel beers or a particular barrel-aged beer that was crafted from day one to be a particular thing, or it allows us to blend beers, which is to say that throughout the year we come up with some different stuff that been aging for a while, and we've invested heavily in that, and I mean both like literally in barrels, in the equipment to get beer in and out of the barrel, but also the beer that goes into the barrel. As most of you know, beer is a fairly short turnaround, but when you're putting it into a barrel, you're talking about putting it in there for 4 months to 18 months. And we've got a few, I don't know, maybe 150 barrels of beer that's sitting in barrels, and that's money that's sitting in barrels. Mm-hmm.
We'll be actually looking at the economic impact of barrel aging when we get to the inventory topic in a few weeks. So I've given a lot of examples, whiskey and in barrels, and what does that mean for your bottom line, or in terms of adding the cost of that aging to the product when you're pricing the product.
Yeah, I can't say in every single case that it's the best financial decision to age a particular beer, but or to do a particular barrel aging project. But I think that it's loss leader is not really the term I want to use. But if you make this amazing barrel aged beer, it might get people coming back for other things. It's something that's interesting and new and different, and they like that, and then they'll come back and buy 3 bottles of farmhouse. Yeah. I think we've got all your questions.
Any more questions, people? 6:58. Unless there's any more questions, I'll be patient for a second. All right, everyone. Thank you. Thank you, Mike, for joining us.
Thank you.
And for this really interesting sour ale with
Black currants.
black currants.
Yeah.
How can you beat that? All right. Thank you, everyone. Good evening.